Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Daily Football Roundup proudly brings to you its best damn podcast in the world, the 12-Ounce Curl Route Podcast. I am your host, Aaron Current. You can find me on Twitter or X at Aaron Current. My co-host, Kyle, you can find him at DF Roundup. And our boy, C-Flow, you can get in touch with him via email if you can find that out.
I just received week 2's letter.
Oh, nice. See?
I guess I could get my email out, maybe. I don't know.
Like week 2 from when we did the
episode
the north?
2. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, no, the east. Yes, the north. You're right.
Okay.
So this week we'll be going over the Western divisions, the NFC and the AFC West. I said last week 2 of the best divisions, and I'll stand beside that because I do believe they are 2 of the best divisions in football. And y'all can give me all the shit you want. You already did off air, so whatever.
Do you on air again?
Yeah. So we'll start with the NFC West, and we'll go over the standings for last year. The 49ers went 13-4 and almost went to the Super Bowl with a bum-arm quarterback. The Seahawks went 9-8. The Rams finished 5-12, and the Cardinals finished 4-13, fighting for that number 1 overall pick that they were not able to get. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't look great for what I said about them being a damn good division. But I mean, let's not forget the Rams were in the Super Bowl just recently, So, and we'll talk about their win totals here. San Francisco's at 10.5. Seattle just behind them at 9.5. LA Rams are at 6.5, and Arizona is at 4.5. As we always do, we'll start at the top and go with the 49ers. We'll talk about their draft class, their additions, and their departures, and then at the end we'll wrap it on up and talk about our predictions. And I think it's going to be, I don't know if you guys are going to have any surprises. I don't think I will, but San Francisco's draft class, they didn't have first or second round picks. I think that's still from the Trey Lance trade, which we'll get into that. But the third round pick, their first pick was Jair Brown, a safety out of Penn State. Then they went and drafted a kicker, Jake Moody out of Michigan. They drafted Cameron Latou, the tight end out of Alabama, Darrell Luter Jr., a corner, Robert Beal Jr., an outside linebacker, I believe from Georgia. D. Winters, a linebacker. Braden Willis, a tight end. Ronnie Bell, a wide receiver out of Michigan. And they wrapped up their draft with Jalen Graham, a linebacker. Kyle, please tell me who sticks out to you in this draft class.
I think in this draft class, it's going to be running back Christian McCaffrey because I think that they traded – I think – it was 3 draft picks this year and 1 next year for CMC. And I think that was like a 2, 3, and a 4. I'd have to look at the actual trade. But let's talk about the 49ers taking a kicker as early as they did when they had last year Robbie Gould and could have brought him back. I think Robbie Gould is still a free agent. And he's been pretty good with the Niners as long as he's been there. But yeah, my 2 takeaways is CMC and Jake Moody.
Yeah, Jake Moody, he's a pretty good kicker. I think what they really wanted, because Robbie Gould was a Bear before he was a 49er, and we let him go when he started missing some kicks, and he said, you know what, I'm gonna make my kicks now. So that's what he did. But they went with Jake Moody, I believe, because Robbie Gould was always accurate, but he was never like a power kicker. And you're seeing that more and more in the NFL where guys are wanting to be able to make those 50-yard field goals and longer. And, Jake Moody's got a heck of a leg. Now, the third round, that's a steep price for a kicker. But, they must have had him high up on their board. I don't know. Corey, who sticks out to you? You can talk about the kicker, and then who sticks out to you most in this draft class?
For me, it actually is Moody. I watched a lot of Michigan games this past year, and I think he's a really good kicker. I don't know what it cost for Gold to keep Gold, but Moody cost $10. So maybe they were clearing up. Maybe they were clearing up a couple $1 million for something else.
$10.
Yeah.
Leaving him. So
yeah. I mean, I don't know what Christian McCaffrey's contract is, but I think it's a decent sized contract, especially for a running back. You said you watched a lot of Michigan. I'd like to talk about Ronnie Bell. He's a wide receiver they grabbed late. I don't see him being like a Debo for them or anything, but I mean, he can get on the field and make some good catches. And overall, a solid draft. I mean, especially considering they didn't start until the third round. They took the first two primetime days off and come away with quite a few quality players, some big school players and stuff. But
well, when you got the good guys on offense and defense they have, you really don't need a good draft.
Right.
I mean, pick up a couple little pieces, some depth, maybe. That's
Right.
it. I mean, you don't really need much.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things is depth is huge for the Niners because I don't know who they have as their strength and conditioning coach because every week somebody's getting hurt. So you've got to have guys that are ready to step up, like Mr. Relevant, Brock Purdy, because you don't know when you're going to be onto that third, fourth, fifth running back that it seems the 49ers get to every year.
Yeah, and I think the Brock Purdy effect really, we saw it in the draft take place. We saw a lot of quarterbacks getting overvalued and overdrafted. I mean, DTR is the guy that I had penciled in for us as a 7th round flyer. I think he went in the 4th round to the Browns. So, and he's looking really good in preseason. I mean, it's preseason, but I think we're seeing that Brock Purdy effect throughout the NFL. To be honest, but we'll move on to their key additions and departures. Their key additions, the big one who I didn't see this coming, Javon Hargrave, defensive tackle, Isaiah Oliver, a corner. They added Sam Darnold, who they just named as their second string quarterback today. Cleveland Farrell, a defensive end, still hanging on to his NFL dreams, and John Feliciano, a center. Obviously, the key addition to me is Javon Hargraves. The rich get richer. That San Francisco defensive line just comes at you in waves, and it's the way they've been able to stay relevant in this NFL. And they added another guy who, even in his, I think he's 32 or 33 this year, even at that age, he's still getting to quarterbacks and affecting the entire defense. It all starts up front, Kyle, you
talk about? Yeah, I mean, you talk about the rich keeping on getting richer. The 49ers are, I think that they've hit oil or something because where are they coming up with this money? CMC, George Kittle. I guess one big thing is they don't have a whole lot of money in their quarterback room. Nobody's on a long-term contract of their quarterbacks. Even Trey Lance being a first-round pick, he's not making, top money as a quarterback or anything like that. So I guess that's maybe where they're saving. But 4 years, $84 million for Javon Hargrave. When they signed that, I was like, wait a minute. How do they fit this under the cap? Because that's huge. And it even came out today, which finally we get some news about a division that we're going to be talking about is Sam Darnold has been named the number 2 quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. Next week at this time, key departures would have been quarterback Trey Lance probably, because there's no way that he's going to stay on this roster. I think he gets traded, and we might see it more of a kind of like Sam Bradford getting traded from the Eagles to the Vikings years and years ago when the Vikings had that big injury. I can't remember who they had at quarterback that year, but they sent a 1st-round pick to the Eagles for Sam Bradford because they were desperate. So maybe the Niners hang on to Trey Lance.
Was that the Bridgewater injury that happened?
I think it might have been. I'm
so,
not sure. I'm not exactly sure, but if the longer they hold on to Trey Lance and if there's injuries that come, they may be able to sell a little bit higher than they might be able to right now.
These GMs.
Right.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Corey.
I was going to say mine is Sam Darnold. There's no ghost in San Francisco. Went to USC. He's back in California. He's better than Trey Lance. For that team, I think that's a great backup. I think he's matured a lot since he's been in the league. So I'm going with Sam Darnold, actually.
Yeah, I agree with that. Him being back out in California, where he's comfortable, and as we talked before we came on air, Corey, it seems like everyone can run this offense except for Trey Lance. But those GMs, they hold on to their draft scouting sheets and stuff. So I don't know about a first-round pick, but I definitely think the Niners can get something out of Trey Lance, anything, and any additional draft capital is a positive for a guy who you were probably going to cut, or I don't know if they would even dress him. But we'll get into their key departures now. The first is Mike McGlinchey, their right tackle, went to Denver. Sorry, excuse me. Samson Ebikin, I always struggle with that name. Defensive end went to Indianapolis. Jimmy Ward went to Houston. Hassan Ridgeway also went to Houston. And D'Amico Ryans, their former defensive coordinator, went to Houston as well to be their head coach. And that's probably a big reason why Jimmy Ward and Hassan Ridgeway went out there and signed with their former coordinator there. I mean, that's the biggest thing to me is we've seen it with Robert Saleh, and now we're seeing it with D'Amico Ryans. Can Kyle Shanahan continue to bring up another defensive coordinator under his tutelage to continue the dominance? I mean, it helps that you have the names that they have, the Bosas and the Hargraves that we just talked about, and guys like that at your disposal. But I mean, you still got to draw them up. You know, you can't just have names out there and say, go do your job. You know, so that'll be interesting to watch this year as the 49ers try to continue their dominance in this division.
And I think losing D'Amico Ryans on that defensive side, too, is going to be huge for those 49ers. I mean, look what he's done for Houston already. But talk about one key departure that's not on here is their quarterback. I guess he was quarterback 3 from last year, actually quarterback 4, Josh Johnson, who signed with the Baltimore Ravens this offseason. The guy continues to find teams that are willing to get him. I think this professionally is like his 16th, 17th, 18th team or something like that. And he's bounced between many leagues too. I mean, kudos to that man for sticking around.
I won't say Trey Lance yet because they will eventually, I think, drop him. And that means you just wasted those picks. Instead, I'll go with the Houston trio. D'Amico Ryans is going to be great as a head coach. And I like Jimmy Ward. I think he's a good player. So having those three kind of go together in sync to Houston, I think that does kind of hurt them just a smidge, especially D'Amico.
Yeah, I liked Ward a lot in the draft. He's a really versatile safety that can play either role. He can get you interceptions, but he'll knock your head off too.
Yeah.
Legally, you know, they can't hit like they used to, but he'll hit as much as he can. You know, that definitely was a good pickup for Houston down there as they try to change that culture. But we'll move on to Seattle, and I'm sure San Francisco will come back up later. So Seattle's draft class. The first round, they grabbed Devin Witherspoon, the corner out of Illinois, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, the wide receiver out of Ohio State. They grabbed Derek Hall, the defensive end from Auburn, Zach Charbonnet, the running back out of UCLA, Anthony Bradford, a guard, Cameron Young, defensive tackle, Mike Morris, the defensive end from Michigan, Oluwatimu, the center from Michigan, Jarek Reed II, a safety, and Kenny McIntosh, a running back from Georgia, with their final pick. I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit, and I'm going to grab Jackson Smith and Jigba. Plugging him into that wide receiver core gives them such a formidable trio, really, with DK and Tyler Lockett already there. We saw Geno Smith really bounce back last year in this offense, and they just gave him another toy to work with. And we'll see if he can continue getting better and better, or if he falls off a cliff, who knows what they'll do going forward. But definitely that's the biggest thing for me is JSN.
Yeah, and Geno Smith stepped up in a really huge way last year. I don't remember which game it was. It was Monday night, Sunday night. Everybody wrote Geno off but he ain't right back, right?
Yeah, that was a great line.
And, you know, the trade to the Broncos, for the Broncos side, it hasn't worked out yet. And they've got in this draft a first, a second, and a fourth that they turned into Devin Witherspoon, Derek Hall, and Anthony Bradford. But, you know, to build on that Jackson Smith and Jigba selection that they took in the first round, let's talk about Zach Charbonnet and Kenny McIntosh, the two running backs they added this season after already hitting last year on Kenneth Walker. I mean, it's the NFL. It's all about getting these guys that it doesn't really cost a lot of money in that backfield. And Seahawks are bringing some guys in.
I'll go with Double O. I think he's going to be a good center. No, you both stole mine, actually. JSN is going to be awesome. And, yeah, he's got those two guys beside him. Fantasy-wise, maybe he won't be awesome, but NFL-wise, I think he's going to be great. And if one of those goes down, I'm sure he could fill right in. And then Charbonnet, I mean, it's Seattle's kind of a turnstile for running backs, and he has a chance to be the starter, and I think he can handle it.
Yeah, I grabbed Charbonnet in our Dynasty League, Kyle, just because I was a big fan of that pick. Definitely out of UCLA, kind of a do-it-all back. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's really quick, and he can run behind his pads too. He's not just a little guy.
Yeah, and with the addition, like we've already said, with Jackson Smith and Jigba and Charbonnet, and already having Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, is the Seahawks are going to come out, and you don't know if they're going to hit you on the ground or through the air, honestly. And I think that it's going to be kind of scary playing against Seattle this year.
Yeah. We'll get into some of their key additions. Draymond Jones was a big name this offseason. I'm not sure if he's defensive tackle or defensive end in their defense, but I think he could play either one. Julian Love, a safety. Jaron Reed from your Packers, Kyle, went out there. They brought back Bobby Wagner, who just continues to have an NFL career. They brought in Devin Bush, so they have a younger linebacker. And they brought in Evan Brown, a guard. Draymond Jones is the biggest name here for me. There was a lot of rumors that the Bears wanted to go after him. They had a lot of cap space. We needed a 3 technique, and they thought he could fill that role. But, I mean, he stayed out west, man, and he didn't even get on a plane to come over as far as I know. So, I mean, that's a huge addition to the Seattle Seahawks, who have Christian McCaffrey in their division that they're going to have to stop. So, you definitely got to load up on D-line and try and attempt to slow down the 49ers offense. Who sticks out to you, Kyle?
Yeah, so, I mean, they just went defensive heavy, it looks like, in free agency, and bringing back that veteran leader, Bobby Wagner, who really shouldn't have left Seattle in the first place. It seemed like a mass exodus last year of just veteran players. It really wasn't. It was Russell Wilson and Bobby Wagner, but their leader on offense and their leader on defense, and they turn around and have a really good season. I'm hoping that bringing Bobby Wagner back will, kind of right that wrong, I guess, of getting rid of him. But even bringing Devin Bush over from, I believe Bush came from the Steelers. I don't think he had a stopgap in between. I think I'm getting him confused with another Steelers linebacker that went to the Titans, and I can't think of it right now.
I know there were 2 Devins in that draft, one from Michigan and one ended up going to
there was a linebacker that left the Steelers and went to the Titans, but it wasn't Devin Bush. But bringing Devin Bush over from Pittsburgh is huge in my opinion too. But yeah,
it's Devin Bush for me all the way. I absolutely loved, speaking of Michigan football, that I watch a lot. I don't know why I'm watching Big Ten football, but Devin Bush, I loved him coming out of the draft and wanted him on the Patriots so bad. I think he's going to fit in there really well at Seattle under Pete Carroll. And then, like y'all said, Bobby Wagner, Pete Carroll's bringing one of his guys back.
Yeah. Pete Carroll definitely showed last year that how good of a coach he was. I kind of wrote him off after Russell left. I was like, well, we'll see if it was Russ or if it was him. And, I mean, his team made the playoffs, But we'll get into their key departures from this season. Rashad Penny, the running back, signed with Philly. Travis Homer, the running back, signed with Chicago. Al Woods, a defensive tackle, went to the Jets. Quentin Jefferson, a defensive tackle, went to the Jets. Shelby Harris, a defensive tackle, went to Cleveland. Poona Ford, a defensive end, went to Buffalo. Ryan Neal, a safety, went to Tampa Bay. And Cody Barton, a linebacker, went to Washington. Without pointing out a single person, I see a lot of defensive line here leaving, and maybe that points to what they did in free agency and in the draft. They drafted quite a bit of D-line as well. I mean, they're getting younger along the defensive line, and I kind of like it, to be honest. I mean, Al Woods was damn good, but I think he's like 34, so it's a little surprising he's still playing, Kyle, what's the biggest thing for you on this?
Yeah, so I mean, like you said, they're moving out of those defensive linemen and everything there too. Moving on from Rashad Penny and Travis Homer, who Penny, I don't think we had one full healthy season in Seattle. Ryan Neal, I think Ryan Neal goes back to Tampa Bay, if I'm not mistaken. I think that he had come from there. But they're losing multiple players at the same positions. But I mean, they're striking in free agency and in the draft and filling those back up. And it seems like the Seahawks are always that team that knows how to really build a roster. And I think a lot can be attributed that to Pete Carroll.
I mean, yeah, I guess you'll go with defense. I mean, Quentin Jefferson, that one kind of stings a little bit, but like you said, they rebuilt it in the draft basically. They got everybody cheaper, everybody younger. I think they're going to put up some points. So I mean, as far as like the defense goes, I mean, you just need to keep up with San Francisco at this point. So I think, like I said, Quentin Jefferson kind of hurts a little bit, but I think they're fine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a bunch of names there, but
it
reloaded.
Is indeed a lot of names.
Yeah, they just reloaded in the draft, man. That's the big thing with them is getting younger and faster and all those things. So we'll go into the Rams now. The Rams draft class, they drafted Steve Avila, a guard, Byron Young, a defensive end out of Tennessee, Kobe Turner, a defensive tackle, Stetson Bennett, a quarterback from Georgia, Nick Hampton, an outside linebacker, Warren McClendon, an offensive tackle, I believe also from Georgia, Davis Allen, a tight end, Puka Nacua, a wide receiver, Trey Tomlinson, a corner, Ochoa Mathis, a defensive end, Zach Evans, a running back, Ethan Evans, a punter, and Jason Taylor the second, the safety, whose father is not the Hall of Famer Jason Taylor, although he does have a son in college right now. But the biggest name for me on here, I'm going to go with Puka Nacua. I liked him a lot when I saw him in the offseason. He's a shifty little wide receiver that they seem to love out there in LA, and they love getting him in space. And I think he could surprise some folks. They went and drafted a small receiver, I think, last year out of Louisville, and I think Puka Nacua takes his job.
For me, I'm going to go with nephew of Hall of Fame running back LaDainian Tomlinson, Trevius Hodges Tomlinson. If having a relation with LT, it's got to put him on the map. I thought he would have gone higher than he really did. I think a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, Stetson Bennett in the 4th," and quarterbacks were just driven up this draft. A lot of quarterbacks who shouldn't have been drafted got drafted, but Hodges Tomlinson, if he can really, if he can put it on, he could step in and fill the role that Ramsey left.
Aaron, I think you just like saying his name.
Yeah,
I'm actually going with Stetson Bennett. Look, the guy won. He won.
Yeah,
and he was just a quiet quarterback. Nobody knows him at the Kroger or whatever, the Publix in LA, so it's fine. I love Stafford. He was probably one of my favorite players, if not my favorite player of all time besides Tom Brady, but he gets hurt. Stetson Bennett can throw the ball to Cooper Kupp if Cooper Kupp can stay healthy. That's the only person to throw the ball to, but well, I guess besides Puka Nacua now. But I think it's Stetson Bennett, man.
I'm surprised, Corey, you didn't say that, oh, I watched a lot of Matt Stafford in Detroit on Sundays after watching all those Michigan Wolverine games on Saturdays.
Yeah, no, I just always loved Matt Stafford. And then they got the Georgia connection. So we'll see.
It's true.
Georgia is everywhere.
They are both Georgia Bulldogs, and I think they're about the same age too. So they got
they might be the same age roughly, yeah.
Aaron, I was about to hit that. I was about to say, I think Stetson Bennett backed up Matt Stafford at Georgia, but I guess we're on the same wavelength.
I can't remember.
He just kind of teed it up for us there.
I thought I seen a stat too that Stetson Bennett played with a guy that was in the league for 5 years and retired before he even got drafted. Like that's insane.
That's insane. Yeah. Well, he got Heisman votes, so I mean that shows you how much of a winner he is. The key off-season additions, DeMarcus Robinson, a wide receiver, Royce Freeman, a running back, and apparently there's a helicopter outside. I don't know if you guys can hear that. Brett Ripien, a quarterback, John Johnson, a safety, and Hunter Long is a tight end that they traded for. I believe that was part of the Jalen Ramsey trade. Honestly, guys, when I pulled this team up on Spot Track, this was a tough team to put additions for because they just load up in the draft and get younger, kind of like what Seattle did. I guess Royce Freeman, he looked okay for a minute there, and they brought him in. I have no idea who sticks out to me on this list, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's really hard for the Rams to have key offseason additions this year because they don't have cap to be doing anything. As much as they probably don't want to admit, they're in a rebuild. Their biggest offseason additions was getting Sean McVay back. How many more years does he have as a head coach in the league? Because the booth is calling his name, and he's still mid-30s, I think, already a Super Bowl winning coach, and does he have anything left to prove? I don't know. He's won a Super Bowl super young. He's got a lot of coordinators leaving him from underneath him, and I think Kevin O'Connell and Zach Taylor both came from McVay. There's not any key offseason free agent additions in my opinion for this team, except I think John Johnson played for the Rams before he joined the Browns, so getting him back is a friendly face.
I guess DeMarcus Robinson, they're going to need somebody else to catch the ball besides Cup because he's going to be triple teamed. And I was actually shocked that the Rams had that many picks when you pulled that up.
Yeah, they don't pick them high, but boy, in the bottom, they just load it up, and they get compensation picks and stuff like that. And this is where they got some of their picks when we talk about their departures. Jalen Ramsey, the corner, they traded to Miami. Allen Robinson, they traded to the Steelers. Leonard Floyd, outside linebacker, went to Buffalo. Bobby Wagner went to Seattle. A'Shawn Robinson went to the Giants. Baker Mayfield went to Tampa. And Taylor Rapp, a safety, went to Buffalo as well. Jalen Ramsey's the low-hanging fruit. Unfortunately, he got injured in training camp. I don't know how much time he's going to leave, but they definitely gave Miami one of the best cornerback tandems in the league by sending him over there. And as much hate as he gets and him losing a step or two in his old age, I still think he's easily a top 3 corner in the league, in my opinion. The guy he's balled out even back to college at Florida State when he was the only guy. Kyle, what about you?
All of these guys are huge for this Rams team. Losing veterans on both sides of the ball. Everybody on this list started meaningful games for the Rams last year. Even Baker Mayfield, who came in, I think, in 3 or 4 days and led this team to a victory that Monday night, I think it was, and kind of brought a little bit of faith back to LA with Matthew Stafford being out. But both sides of the ball losing guys. Allen Robinson was supposed to be huge coming into LA. Bobby Wagner, that vet leader. Leonard Floyd, a veteran leader. This is Rams are in a rebuild.
This shows you right here that they don't have any cap money. Is looking at this list for the most part. Since all these are good, I can't pick one. I'm going to go with Liam Cohen. I think Liam Cohen is now the back at the offensive coordinator for the University of Kentucky, but I think McVay really likes him. I think that's a big hit too.
Yeah, Liam's definitely a big name. He gets to come back to college and run his own offense because Mark Stoops is a defensive head coach, so he can kind of build his resume and also prepare those guys for the NFL because that offense has ran over half of the NFL now. So they know the terminology before they even get into the league. But we'll move off them and move into the Arizona Cardinals and talk about their draft class. They drafted Paris Johnson, offensive tackle out of Ohio State in the first round, and then followed that up with B.J. Ojulari, defensive end from LSU. Garrett Williams, a corner. Michael Wilson, a wide receiver. John Gaines, the second, a guard out of UCLA. Clayton Tune, not Callieton Tune, the quarterback out of Houston. Owen Popo, a linebacker, I believe from Auburn. Keitrell Clark, a corner from Louisville, and finished up with Dante Steele, defensive lineman from West Virginia. I liked Paris Johnson. He was probably my favorite offensive tackle in this class, but the name that sticks out to me is Clayton Tune. The guy put up crazy numbers in college, and I think led his team to 4 bowl games while he was still in college. He had 40 touchdowns last year to like 9 interceptions or something like that. And we know Houston puts up big numbers like that every year, it seems like. But I mean, I don't with Kyler Murray out, maybe this guy gets a shot to start some games for a team that looks like they're shooting for the number 1 overall pick again this year. What about you, Kyle?
Yeah, I think kind of what you said, Clayton Tune. And from what I've been reading or hearing or seeing or whatever you want to call it, is there's potential that he is the week 1 starter with Kyler Murray out. They're not favored in any of the games that they're playing this year, so why the heck not? But I really do think that the biggest win on draft day for them was trading back with the Houston Texans. Not only getting a big, fat, meaty offensive tackle, but potentially having the first and second overall pick next year, potentially for Paris Johnson to block for the number 1 overall pick, whichever quarterback the Cardinals decide to take, because I don't think Kyler Murray is going to last too much longer in Arizona.
I'll go with Michael Wilson, wide receiver out of Stanford. No, I did not watch Pac-10 football or Pac-12 or 9, whatever it is.
I think there's only 4 of them left.
Yeah, some of the state schools and then Stanford, I think. I think, I mean, he was picked in the 3rd round, but I mean, he's got potential and they need pass catchers. So it'll be him and Hollywood. Is that Hollywood Brown? Marcus Brown?
Hollywood Brown, and they have Rondell Moore as well.
And Rondell Moore. So somebody's got to catch the ball out there. Maybe he can help them try to turn around in their rebuild.
Yeah, that was a big thing that you talked about, though, Kyle. If they end up with 1st and 2nd overall pick, which right now is looking like the quarterback out of USC, whose name escapes me right now, Caleb Williams, throwing to Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, that's look out for that tandem.
And Caleb Williams, I think, came out today and said that he is not committed to the 2024 NFL draft. He still has another year of eligibility after that. So really, if a team's on the clock at number 1 and he doesn't like it, he can go back to USC, continue to make millions and millions of dollars, and wait to see, what his ultimate team's going to be the following year, I guess.
Yeah. You go for that Pac-12 championship against San Diego State, maybe.
You said they got a
Well, he'd be in the Big Ten if he stayed an extra year.
Oh, that's right. They're going to – that's right. I can't
Big 20.
Big 20. We'll get into their key additions. Kaiser White, outside linebacker. Hijalte Froholt,
there you go,
center. Zach Pascal, a wide receiver. Jeff Swaim, a tight end. Carlos Watkins, a defensive end, and Chris Boyd, a corner. The only name I even know on this list, I know Zach Pascal because I think he played for the Colts. But Kaiser White, that White family, everyone seems to work out except for Kevin, which is unfortunate for me as a Bears fan. But all the rest of them are really athletic. Maybe if Kevin White just played corner or something, he'd have been okay. I don't know. I don't know. But that's the only name that really sticks out to me on this list.
Yeah, with me, has Jeff Swaim been playing in the year for 20 years or in the league for 20 years or something?
Right.
I feel like he's just always, for whatever reason, getting with a team. We'll see. I'm not really excited about anybody they brought in free agency. Honestly, I could see the Cardinals being last year's Houston Texans, who bring in a head coach and get rid of him after 1 year, because that first introduction of Jonathan Gannon coming into the facility and just being a little bit cringe with the players, how long can that stick around? And they might bring in a veteran head coach or something of that nature, but there's not much that excites me with this team this year. And I'm probably staying very far away from this team in fantasy football as well.
This is just these names mean to me is there was money that had to be given away. I mean, that's about it. I don't know why anybody would have signed up for Arizona. They will not win 4 games. I'm definitely betting the under on that. So that's about all I got to say about this team.
Yeah, and part of those losses, we'll get into their key departure. The big name is DeAndre Hopkins, the wide receiver, went to Tennessee. Zach Allen, defensive end, went to Denver. Byron Murphy, a corner, went to Minnesota. Marcus Golden, outside linebacker, goes to Pittsburgh. Rodney Hudson, interior offensive lineman, is sitting out there in free agency. And Cliff Kingsbury got fired, so I had to put him on the list. The big name on here is D-Hop, but I want to talk about Byron Murphy because he's a corner that I liked a lot. When the Bears played them, I saw him really flash, and when I saw him in free agency, I was like, wow, we can add him and really add to our defense. But he ends up going to Minnesota in my division where I'll get to see him twice a year. And it's unfortunate because he's a corner that's not scared to hit, but he can take the ball away a few times as well. And I'll be interested to see how his career continues out there in Minnesota. I believe he went to Washington, which is quietly becoming the DBU of the West Coast. Kyle, what say you?
Yeah, Zach Allen for me, who I feel like stepped up in a big way with J.J. Watt not being out there, and signed a 3-year, $45 million deal with the Broncos in the offseason. And then DeAndre Hopkins, how do you not take a hit on some of his cap to at least trade him and get something for him? Because the teams that were talking to you about trading for him were the same teams that wanted to add him in free agency.
Yeah,
it just doesn't make sense. At least eat some money and get a 7th or something for him so you can bring another guy in the draft who's super cheap. But instead, cut him and took a cap hit anyway and didn't get anything for it.
Yeah, it's D-Hop for me. I mean, he was out for 6 weeks, but when he came back, he was crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's getting up there in age, but I'm not sure why he picked Tennessee, but that's neither here nor there. But I mean, it's D-Hop for me. Arizona's just tough to watch.
Yeah,
at this point.
Yeah, it was between Tennessee and New England, I believe, and he chose Tennessee. I'm really not sure why. And you brought up a good point, Kyle, about why would you not just try, especially for a rebuilding team. This team is clearly rebuilding. Why wouldn't you want as much draft capital as you can possibly get, even if it's a 6th or 7th rounder for I don't know. It doesn't make sense, but a lot of things they do don't make sense, and that's why they're at the bottom of the division. And I'll bring up the win totals again. Again, theirs is 4.5. The Rams is 6.5. Seattle's 9.5. San Francisco's 10.5. I want to say that the Rams have somewhat of a bounce back season because, as you said, Stafford's coming back, Kupp's coming back, Aaron Donald's coming back. But other than that, they don't have a whole lot. And who knows if Sean McVay's halfway out and halfway in, you really need a big time commitment as a head coach, So for those reasons, they may hit over on that, but I don't see them like they might be like an 8-9 team. You know what I'm saying? I think San Francisco wins this division. They're clearly the best roster. They have my favorite coach in the entire league. I think that they're the best team in the division. Seattle has a lot of young pieces, as we talked about earlier, and I hate to say this, as Brock Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant, but somehow I trust him more than I trust what I've seen out of Geno Smith for his entire career. We saw it really good last year. Can he continue that? If he does, and I'm eating crow on this at the end of the season when we're going over who wins the division, I'll gladly eat crow, but I'm going with the Niners. I think they're Super Bowl contenders, and I think that continues into this year.
Yeah, I think since you brought up Brock Purdy, a quarterback that he reminds me of who was drafted completely opposite of Purdy, a former number 1 overall pick who's no longer in the league, but was a big-time game manager, is Alex Smith. When I watched Brock Purdy last year, he did not have a lot of deep downfield throws. He targeted Christian McCaffrey, and he targeted George Kittle a lot as well. How long can that hold up over the course of a full season? I'm not sure. I really like what Seattle did in the offseason, but again, Aaron, I'm right there with you with saying that can Geno do it 2 years in a row? I think it's really close, and just the way that they have been building their roster the last few years and all the additional picks that they've got from trading away a franchise quarterback, give me Seattle in an upset winning this division.
Nice. That's a good call. I mean, I kind of struggled with it in my head, but I don't know. I got to give the nod to San Fran when they're contending for Super Bowls, Go ahead, Corey. Tell me who you got in this division.
I'll go with 49ers, and that's with people getting hurt all the time. I just think they're that much better. Rams can easily go 2-6. I just looked through the schedule. I don't see 9 wins total between Rams and Arizona together. So I think it's San Fran by at least 2 or 3 games.
Why are people so out on the Rams just a year away from being in the Super Bowl? Is it all those departures, or like I don't know. I haven't looked at their schedule. I'm just
who do they have left from that Super Bowl team? They don't have a lot of guys left.
That's the thing. I mean, Donald is Donald, but I mean that's a player on the defense. Yeah. Now with Ramsey gone, especially, and then Cup is one step away from being done again. And Stafford's always had back problems and stuff.
That's true.
So when you take those away, it might as well be UCLA out there. I mean, at that point. So
yeah, it all kind of went downhill when Whitworth retired, their left tackle that really protected that blind side. And it shows you in the NFL, even if you don't build your team through the trenches, you can be hurting, you know?
Well, not only that for the Rams, but look at how much money they have tied up in Matthew Stafford too. I don't know what his cap hit is this year, but it's huge. And that's why they're having to let a lot of guys go and we see this with Super Bowl teams all the time, is they hand out contracts and to the guys that are coming and doing it. And then a lot of guys leaving free agency because they've got that ring. Now it's time for them to go chase that bag. And, not a lot of teams are like the Chiefs who will trade their all-pro wide receiver for draft picks and continue to build. And the 3 of us could be wide receivers for the Chiefs. And that team would still probably go to the playoffs, I feel like. I'd probably lead the league in receiving. I'm kind of like Kelsey. But it's just hard. I mean, all that turnover that they had and, the 14 new players that they brought in as rookies that they could surprise us and everything. But, it's just when you have that amount of turnover, it's hard to stay relevant after winning a Super Bowl.
But at the same time, too, look, all right, Bears fan, Packers fan, would you all trade up, do all the same thing the Rams did to win one Super Bowl for the next 20 years?
Absolutely. I would do it right now.
And so you wouldn't. So that's what the Rams did. There's not that many fans in LA, but that's what they did, is essentially traded their soul for a Super Bowl. And they probably won't be close to another one until 2040.
Look, I've seen Packers win multiple Super Bowls. I've even seen them beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. I don't need to sell my soul to see them win another one.
When's the last win?
2010.
Okay. So you're 13 years right now. So
I mean, you're gonna get there, Corey. Don't worry about it. The Patriots, Bill Belichick only has a few years left, and then what are they gonna do? Hire the guy that's the head coach in Madden that they have to create every year because
I know, right?
Bill Belichick won't sign a contract to be in the game. You'll be there with us. Don't worry.
We have an offensive coordinator now. Okay, that's an actual offensive guy. And Zeke.
Well, you were putting me on a nice segue there when you talked about the Chiefs there, Kyle. But we kind of got off script again. But we'll hop into the AFC West. Last year's standings: the Chiefs went 14-3 and won the Super Bowl. The Chargers went 10-7. The Raiders finished 6-11, and the Broncos finished 5-12. But we'll get into their win totals for this year. Kansas City's at 11.5. That's a high-ass number. The Chargers are at 9.5. Vegas is at 6.5. And Denver is at 8.5, which is a little surprising after last year. But we'll talk about them in a minute. So let's start out with Kansas City. Their draft. They went with Felix Anudike Uzama, the defensive end out of Kansas State. They added Rashee Rice, the wide receiver out of SMU, Wanya Morris, an offensive tackle, Clamari Connor, a corner, B.J. Thompson, a defensive end, Keontae Coburn, a defensive tackle out of Texas, and finish up the draft with Nick Jones, a corner. Rashee Rice sticks out to me on this list. I liked him a lot in pre-draft. I don't know. Is he going to see the field? But if he can see the field, Mahomes is going to know how to use him. I think he's like 6'2", pretty shifty, a little fast, so he can kind of do it all. He's a well-rounded receiver. He's not like one or the other. I think he kind of does everything for him. We'll see if we'll see how Mahomes uses him in their offense. Kyle, what about you?
Yeah, I think getting them another weapon, and it seems like the Chiefs every year go into the draft and add another weapon for Patrick Mahomes. That's supposed to break out and supposed to be great. And Sky Moore didn't really come on last year. We're still waiting for Mecole Hardman, who's now with the Jets, to have a huge year. But let's talk about how many defensive tackles did they draft? One or two, I think. But with Chris Jones holding out till at least week 8, these defensive linemen are going to have to step up, and they've got George Karlaftis from last year as well. But that's going to be a huge hole on their defense. It's going to need to be filled until Chris Jones either they figure out a contract, which we'll see. The Chiefs got rid of Tyreek Hill. What makes you think they won't get rid of Chris Jones? Your name isn't Patrick Mahomes.
I know a team that could pay him if they want to trade him to us.
The Cardinals probably.
Yeah.
But I mean, these defensive linemen are going to have to step up huge with Chris Jones out those first 8 weeks.
I liked Rashee Rice a lot. He was an excellent receiver at SMU. He runs a 4.5. I mean, so that's, like I said, it's another weapon for him. He could turn into something special for somebody like Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. So we'll get into their key additions. They added Jawan Taylor, right tackle, Charles Aminiho, a defensive end, Donovan Smith, a left tackle, Drew Tranquil, a linebacker, Mike Edwards, a safety, Richie James, the wide receiver, and Lamar Jackson, the corner. I only added him because the name. I don't know much about him. But the big thing for me here is and we'll get into it in their departures, I guess, but they lost both their tackles and they hit free agency and I mean, who doesn't want to cover Mahomes' blind side or the other side? And the Chiefs learned from losing that Super Bowl. Yeah, you can have the best quarterback in the league, but if you can't protect him, it's irrelevant. So they've invested in their offensive line, and it shows right here. I think those were great moves by the Kansas City Chiefs to stay relevant.
Yeah, I think them getting Richie James as well, the wide receiver from the Giants, who came on really strong last year when there was nobody else to throw the ball to, is a huge get for them. And I don't know why the Giants let him get out of the building. But again, like you said, Lamar Jackson, the corner, can't wait until we hear what we heard with Josh Allen picking off Josh Allen. Maybe we'll hear Lamar Jackson picks off Lamar Jackson.
I'll go with Drew Tranquil coming out of the division. He was at the Chargers. I think he's quietly a really good linebacker. So just adding on to that defense.
And I mean, I'd be remiss if we didn't mention Mike Edwards, the Kentucky safety that went to Tampa Bay and won him a ring with Tommy, and now he goes to Kansas City. He's kind of ring chasing, but I'm all right with it. I mean, if I got a chance to sign with a Super Bowl favorite, I'm probably going to do it as well. I don't know what he got paid, but Mike Edwards is a good safety for their defense. So we'll get into their key departures. Orlando Brown Jr., the left tackle, signed with Cincinnati. Andrew Wiley, the right tackle, signed with Washington. Juju Smith-Schuster signed with the New England Patriots. Frank Clark, the defensive end, signed with Denver. Mecole Hardman signed with the New York Jets, and Eric Bieniemy is now the offensive coordinator in Washington. I think the big name here is Eric Bieniemy because he got interviewed like 15 times and wasn't able to get a job. And I think people, GMs and owners were having, after seeing Matt Nagy fail and Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl, but then ultimately failed in Philadelphia, I think people were worried about grabbing an offensive coordinator from under Andy Reid because Andy Reid does so much. Eric Bieniemy gets to go out to Washington under a defensive head coach, run his system, and show that he can be a head coach. So I think that that's a big deal for him as a person. And it could be a big deal for Kansas City, as I believe they turn the reins back over to Matt Nagy, who, we'll just leave that.
I'm gonna agree with you on Eric Bieniemy going to Washington. I think that's huge for Washington. Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, I still believe plays for Washington.
He does.
Terry McLaurin. You got Brian Robinson Jr. running back. You've got Antonio Gibson, who's supposed to be catching a lot of balls out of the backfield, and that team, that Washington team, that culture has changed with old boy out of there now. Doesn't even,
Yep, nope.
terrible. But I'm excited to see for Washington, maybe a name change or something like that. But Juju Smith-Schuster, what did he sign, Corey, with the Patriots?
Too much money. I don't know.
So, again, that's the thing. These wide receivers coming and going. Juju's one. I'm curious to see how he's going to do in New England. But again, those two tackles, Orlando Brown and Andrew Wiley, that's a lot. Your anchors, replacing those.
I do think Scary Terry is going to be out for a few weeks, so we'll see what happens there.
Toe injury, I think. Yeah.
It's definitely Eric Bieniemy. It's a travesty he's not gotten a head coaching gig yet. I'm actually going to go with Mecole Hardman. I think Mecole Hardman, if he would have been healthy, which we can say that about everybody, but I think he was really loved by Mahomes and Kansas City, and he just seemed like one of those players that was kind of there, with everybody from the beginning. So I think that's a big hit for them too. And the locker room, nothing else.
Just to touch on your Mecole Hardman choice too, he probably has a clear path to playing time. Corey Davis retired today. Wide receiver for the Jets. So I think Randall Cobb's going to be huge in helping Hardman in his development and everything too. And getting to play with Rodgers is probably. I mean, you've already played with Mahomes, but not a lot of people can say that they played with Rodgers and Mahomes. I know Marquez Valdez can say that, but there's not a lot of wide receivers who can say they played with both those guys.
Yeah, and I've been watching Hard Knocks lately, and Randall Cobb is he hasn't been playing in the preseason, so he's kind of been an extra wide receivers coach for them out in New York. So that'll definitely be something to watch for out there. So we'll get into the Los Angeles Chargers. Man, that still feels weird saying. I feel like they should still be in San Diego, but we'll get into their draft class. They went with Quentin Johnston, the wide receiver out of TCU in the first round. Tuli Tuipulotu, the defensive tackle from USC, Diane Henley, a linebacker, Darius Davis, a wide receiver, Jordan McFadden, a guard, Scott Matlock, a defensive tackle, and finished it up with Max Duggan, a quarterback out of TCU at the end. I didn't put the schools on here, but I believe I know Max Duggan's from TCU, Quentin Johnston's from TCU, and I believe it's Darius Davis is also from TCU. So it seems like the Chargers saw that offense last year that did great all the way up until they ran into the Bulldogs of Georgia. And they decided, hey, let's bring that out west and see how it works out here. And from everything I've heard, Quentin Johnston has really been tearing it up in the off-season program with the Chargers, and we'll see how he fits in. I mean, I think it was Keenan Allen maybe was on a show I was listening to, and he said, we really don't have like a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, a slot receiver and we'll get into it with the additions with Kellen Moore's offense. We all kind of learn all of them. So that'll be interesting to watch with Quentin Johnston, who really tore up the college game last year. And then had some people questioning about his drops and catching balls against his body instead of with his hands. But, he gets to play with a hell of a quarterback out there in L.A. What about you, Kyle?
The Chargers taken 2 wide receivers in the first 4 rounds while having Keenan Allen and Mike Williams there. For me, it just shows what they're going to do this season with their offense. You still have Austin Eckler, even though he has his contract issues and everything like that. But I'll tell you what, Kellen Moore, you better have a good year as an offensive coordinator this year because Staley may not be around long after the way they got knocked out of the playoffs.
I think the reason they drafted 2 wide receivers is because the 2 they have now can't stay on the field together. Like, that's a big issue for them. Like, if Keenan and Williams could stay on together, it would have been crazy. So I think more or less, too, they're just getting insurance. But I'm going to go with Tuli. I think we just talked about they lost Tranquil. I think he's a good fill-in for that defense, and I like the pick a lot.
Yeah, I liked Tuli a lot too in the pre-draft. I was looking at, like I said, the Bears needed a 3-tech. I was looking at him a little bit for that, but they went a different route. So we'll get into their key additions. And honestly, guys, when I brought up Spot Track, there was no one really Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator, coming in, Nick Williams, a defensive tackle, and Eric Kendricks, a linebacker. Literally, that was it. I mean, I looked through free agents, I looked through trades, I looked through transactions. That was it. So obviously, the key addition is Kellen Moore bringing that offense over here. I believe his numbers when he was in Dallas, I don't know if it was scoring or what, but they were all top 6 while he was calling plays. So for him to get his hands on Justin Herbert's and all the weapons that we just talked about via the draft and even before that, and Justin Herbert just got his big long-term deal, it'll be interesting to see how this goes forward. And just like you said, Kyle, if Brandon Staley can't get it together, they might have a head coach in waiting right there in Kellen Moore.
Yeah, and I was going to say, before you even brought it up, instead of key additions, how about key retentions with Justin Herbert getting the bag this offseason, and them loading him up with more wide receivers. Herbert, he hasn't really – he won Rookie of the Year his rookie season, and I think also set the single-season record for most passing touchdowns, but he hasn't really lived up to – in my opinion, he hasn't lived up to the hype. I think that Burrow's overshadowed him, and he's got some things to continue to work on, and we'll see what happens.
I'm going to go with Eric Kendricks. I'm sure you all are glad to see him leave your division with those 900 tackles.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be a great addition for them, help bolster that offense or that defense. And you only have a few here. I think they like their team. They just need to adjust a couple things. So that's why we probably don't see that many additions here.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And, it's difficult for Herbert to be in that bubble in the AFC West, and you have the best quarterback in football in your division. So, Kyle, as far as him not living up to the hype.
I agree 100%, yeah.
Oh, your bias is showing, Corey.
Corey, you're ugly, but you're funny, buddy.
So their key departures, Drew Tranquil, the linebacker we talked about with Kansas City. Matt Fielder, a guard, went to Tampa Bay. DeAndre Carter, a wide receiver, went to Vegas. Storm Norton, the right tackle, went to New Orleans. And Christian Covington, a defensive tackle, went to Detroit. Storm Norton was pretty good at right tackle, but I believe PFF had him rated as one of the worst starting right tackles, but he was a starter, so there's that. He goes to New Orleans to try and bolster their offensive line. I didn't want to take the easy one because Corey's kind of already talked about him, and I'm sure he'll talk about him again. But who sticks out to you, Kyle?
I'll leave Corey to say DT there, but Matt Fielder signed a 3-year deal back in 2021 and then started every game at guard for this team for 2 seasons, then was released in March. That's a hole to fill on that offensive line, starting 34 at least 35 games, including the playoffs.
Drew DeAndre Carter, no, it's Drew. we've already touched on him. It's a big loss, but they got a couple fill-ins for him. We just talked about Kendrick, so hopefully that they can fill the place between him and Tuli.
Yeah, we'll see it. We'll see how it works out with them. The Las Vegas Raiders is the next team we're going to cover. We'll get into their draft class first. They drafted Tyree Wilson, the defensive end out of Texas Tech. Michael Mayer, the tight end out of Notre Dame. Byron Young, the defensive tackle out of Alabama. Trey Tucker, the wide receiver. Jacorian Bennett, a corner. Aiden O'Connell, a quarterback out of Purdue. Christian Smith, the second, a safety. Amari Burney, the linebacker. And Nesta Jade Silvera, defensive tackle. Aiden O'Connell is who I'm going to talk about. He has been tearing it up this preseason. He looks like Farva, plays like Favre. He had the shirt today, and it looks awesome. He was really good at Purdue. He was a guy that I had watched. He's strong in the pocket. He won't give you a ton athletically, but he will stand back there and hit the throws that he needs to hit. And with Josh McDaniels, he succeeded with a not so athletic quarterback. Let's be real. So maybe Aiden O'Connell can take over that job for Jimmy G, who we know can't seem to stay healthy. What about you, Kyle? Who sticks out?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Michael Mayer, the tight end. I think that's a huge get for the Raiders. Yeah, you lost Darren Waller, who last year didn't stay healthy for you, and you get a lot younger at that tight end position too. You give somebody for Jimmy Garoppolo to be able to hit across the middle of the field, and maybe take some pressure off from their big star wide receiver.
Michael Mayer for me. As long as Josh doesn't piss him off too, he'll be around for a little bit longer. And Trey Tucker. Trey Tucker was good in Cincinnati. And I think they need another slot guy. So I think they had a pretty decent draft overall.
Yeah, Michael Mayer, tight end out of Notre Dame, and they just seem to churn out tight ends from that college. I think originally he's from Northern Kentucky, chose to go to Notre Dame, and Kentucky's not huge like high school sports. So that is a big deal when you have a tight end from Kentucky going to Notre Dame. But yeah, that's a hell of a pickup. I want to talk about Tyree Wilson for just a second because I really loved him pre-draft. I know Will Anderson got all the love, but I liked Tyree Wilson better than Will Anderson. He was bigger, stronger, a little bit faster. I thought it depends on what kind of defense you're running. I thought he was more of a 4-3 edge as opposed to Will Anderson, a 3-4, in my opinion. Now, Will Anderson will probably go and prove me wrong because he is great. He did play at Alabama, but I really like Tyree Wilson a lot, and it'll be interesting to see how he does learning from Max Crosby. And I think maybe playing on the other side of him will be interesting to watch out there in Vegas. We'll move on to their additions now. So the Raiders addition, they added Jimmy Garoppolo, the quarterback, Jacoby Myers, the wide receiver, Marcus Peters, a corner, Austin Hooper, a tight end, who I forgot about completely, OJ Howard, a tight end as well, who I also forgot about, Greg Van Roten, the guard, DeAndre Carter, the wide receiver, and Marcus Epps, the safety. I want to talk about Austin Hooper a little bit because he really splashed onto the scene in Cleveland, and then I think he went to Atlanta and just kind of disappeared. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to. He's got Michael Mayer. Boy, I said that country as hell. He's got Michael Mayer breathing down his neck. So Austin Hooper at tight end, we'll see if he can, catch a couple touchdowns from Jimmy G or Aiden O'Connell, and see how it works out for him out there. What about you, Kyle?
Yeah, for me, I'm going to go with Jimmy G. Obviously you had to replace your beloved franchise quarterback, and they backed themselves into a corner with Jimmy Garoppolo. They were all in on Jimmy G, and then they were uncertain on Jimmy G because of the foot, but they remained all in on Jimmy G because there were no other options out there. We'll see how long Jimmy G is able to hold up with this team because, again, he's not really somebody who can finish a whole season, which, Aaron, you alluded to Aiden O'Connell as well. Maybe we'll see him get some playing time this year. But Austin Hooper, OJ Howard, who's also a former first-round pick, they've kind of loaded up that tight end room too.
Yeah.
Clearly Josh is trying to build the Las Vegas Patriots with Jacoby Myers as well. But having Jimmy G and Jacoby in as guys he's comfortable with, that might help. And losing Waller, obviously, getting all these tight ends and drafting Mayer. Maybe they're trying to get some more points on offense.
Now, here's a quick trivia question for you before we jump to the next thing: is do you know, firstly, Darren Waller's position when he came into the NFL?
No.
Do you know which team he came in? Do you know which team he came into the NFL with?
No.
Baltimore.
He was a wide receiver for the Ravens.
Yeah, wow. It was the Ravens.
And then he
John
had a little bit of
Gruden saw
off-field.
him in a joint practice, right?
I'm not sure. He had off-field concerns. He actually got suspended, I think, for a full year.
Yeah.
I think. And then, came over to Las Vegas, Oakland, and it broke out.
Yeah, he's got a hell of a story. Actually, he has a podcast where he talks about it. He dealt with injuries, so he started using pain pills, actually got addicted to them, and fought through his addiction to come back and be a successful. It's a hell of a story, honestly. If there's ever a 30 for 30 for it with it in the future, that'd be interesting to watch. But yeah,
looks like Farva got hooked like Favre.
I do hate that Max Crosby and Waller are no longer together on the same team because they both struggle with substance abuse together and got clean together. So that kind of sucks. But Waller's off to greener pastures, I guess.
Bluer pastures.
Okay.
So the Raiders' key departures: Derek Carr, the quarterback, went to New Orleans. Foster Moreau, the tight end, went to New Orleans. Rocky Sin, the corner, went to Baltimore. Andrew Billings, the defensive tackle, went to Chicago. Denzel Perryman, the linebacker, went to Houston. Mac Hollins, the wide receiver, went to Atlanta. And Cleveland Farrell went to San Francisco. And as you guys just mentioned, I forgot to put him on the list, but Darren Waller, the tight end, goes to the New York Giants. The biggest thing for me here is Derek Carr. I mean, the guy was the face of the franchise in Las Vegas, moved with that team from Oakland to Las Vegas and was supposed to pull that team out of the depths of what John Gruden left behind. And they kind of just gave up on him almost a year in. I don't know if that was a Josh McDaniels thing or if they just didn't click. I know Josh McDaniels he did that with Jay Cutler in Denver. He just he didn't want anything to do with him, kicked him out, and the rest is history. But yeah, Derek Carr being gone from this franchise, it's going to look, and they got similar colors, but it's going to look weird seeing him in black and gold instead of the silver and black of the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually choose a super underrated choice. Just the way that he's looked in the offseason so far, and the way that he's been bullying corners over in Atlanta is Mac Hollins. The dude was over there looking like who's the actor that plays Aquaman? Jason Momoa with the long hair and just chiseled as all can be. But he's just, and he had some really good games last year for Las Vegas too. But you know, if Ritter is the choice in Atlanta and Mac Hollins is one of the 2 or 3 wide receivers out on the field, he could see some serious uptick in usage.
I'm going to go with Rocky Sin. I always liked him, even in Indy. There's a lot of good fast receivers in this division, and losing him, I mean, he can keep up with them. He's not going to get 6 interceptions this season, but I think that's a big loss for them.
Yeah, I liked him coming out in the draft as well. He's a guy that I've always kind of watched from afar. He's definitely a good signing for Baltimore to continue their how good they are at bringing in talent. So we'll go to the Denver Broncos and their draft. They didn't have a ton of picks because they traded a lot for Russell Wilson, but Marvin Mims, the wide receiver out of Oklahoma, Drew Sanders, the linebacker out of Arkansas, Riley Moss, a corner from Iowa, J.L. Skinner, the safety out of Boise State, and Alex Forsyth, the center out of, I believe, Oregon. The biggest name for me on this list is Drew Sanders, the linebacker out of Arkansas. Saw him a lot in college because I live in SEC country, and he's you talk about your sideline to sideline linebacker, the guy that does it all for you, good in coverage and can knock out a running back at the same time. That's the guy that can do it all. And I definitely think that, with the Denver Broncos already strong defense, you plug him in there in the middle, I think he's going to have a hell of a career for him. What about you, Kyle?
Yeah, for me, it's going to be Marvin Mims, the wide receiver from Oklahoma, especially with them losing
Cam Sutton.
No, they lost a wide receiver this offseason already to an Achilles injury, I believe. Was it Hamler that got hurt?
No,
Hamler and Sutton are hurt.
Cortland Sutton he's doing okay right now, but man,
I thought it was Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick.
Tim Patrick.
I think Tim Patrick's out for the season, I believe, for a second year in a row. So yeah, and they had 5 picks. I don't know if it was the Broncos who said this or another, maybe it was the Rams that said this. Oh, our first round pick this year, we're just going to watch highlight of Matthew Stafford. Well, the Broncos' first round pick this year, they were watching highlights of Russell Wilson while Seattle was picking top 5. So you better hope Sean Payton can come in and really turn things around, because five drafted players is not a lot to help fill that roster.
Yeah. No, but I love me some Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma. Really, really wanted him to be a Patriot. If with 5 picks, you got 2 really good ones there with Marvin Mims and Drew Sanders. So they did good with what they had. But yeah, Marvin Mims for me by far and away.
Yeah, don't sleep on Raleigh Moss either. The Iowa, they play
Yep.
good physical defense. You put him at corner. I mean, they're kind of stacked at corner already, but I mean, it's always good to have young guys in the pipeline. So that we'll get into their key additions. And Kyle, you touched on one there. Sean Payton, the head coach, that's the biggest one to me. Mike McGlinchey, the right tackle they brought in. Ben Powers, the guard. Zach Allen, the defensive end. Samaje Perine, the running back. Frank Clark, the defensive end. And Marquez Callaway, the wide receiver they brought in from New Orleans. The biggest one is obviously Sean Payton. He's got a lot on his plate to turn this around, and he kind of alluded to that when he had his first press conference and talked about the mess that Nathaniel Hackett left behind. And Aaron Rodgers told him to keep his coach's name out of his mouth. I thought he was going to Will Smith him for a second, but he kind of I don't know if he's and then Sean Payton kind of drew back his statements, but I kind of like it. I mean, we watched last year Nathaniel Hackett. They had to hire a whole nother guy to help him with clock management. It was a train wreck. You bring in a possible it's crazy to put Hall of Fame on something, but a possible Hall of Fame quarterback in, and that's supposed to turn around. You traded all this draft capital away to try and build this team through a young offensive mind head coach, and it failed. They fell on their faces. So I don't know how else Sean Payton could have worded that to say that he was taking over a train wreck. And I mean, it might take. I don't know if it'll happen this year. We'll have to watch and see. But Sean Payton's the biggest thing on here.
Yeah, I think Sean Payton has a lot that not necessarily to live up to, but to live up to. They gave up a first and a second round pick to trade for Sean Payton, to trade for a coach, a first and a second round pick to trade for a retired head coach. I mean, but he's also a Super Bowl winning head coach. And I think that's going to pay a whole lot more dividends than a first year head coach as well. But let's talk about Mike McGlinchey, the right tackle that came over from the 49ers. Going to be able to help protect Russell Wilson and maybe give him a little bit more time to find a wide receiver downfield, or, hand off to Javonte or Samaje.
Yeah.
For me, it is Samaje Perine. I know Sean Payton has said that Javonte Williams is on a great pace, but even if he is on a good pace to come back week 1, he's not going to have a full workload. I still don't think he'll even play till like week 3 or 4. Cincinnati, it didn't cost that much money to keep Samaje. I don't know what happened there. But to me, Samaje Perine is going to be a great – I mean, he could be a starter in this offense for a few games and then a great backup for when Javonte comes back.
Yeah, Perine was a hell. Go ahead, Kyle.
The only thing I was going to say is they also signed a running back named Tony Jones Jr. And the only reason I really know Tony Jones Jr. is because I'm pretty sure 3 or 4 years ago I picked him up in fantasy because he was the starter for the Saints, when Sean Payton was there and everything too. And a lot of these head coaches that go to new places, they like to bring the familiar faces with them. I don't think he's going to have a role, but to have him as a third running back is going to be familiarity for Sean Payton.
Yeah, Samaje Perine, I mean, he was a hell of a running back for the Bengals last year, spelling Joe Mixon. I think they were just trying to get younger in Cincinnati, and they know they've got a big contract coming up.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think Samaje was like $3.1 million or something.
Yeah.
That's not that much compared to all the other shit
Yeah, they were probably just trying to get younger at the position, and that's the only thing I can think of. We'll get into their key departures. Draymond Jones, defensive tackle, went to Seattle. Calvin Anderson, offensive tackle, went to New England. Dalton Risner is a free agent currently. Graham Glasgow, a guard, went to Detroit. Ronald Darby, a corner, went to Baltimore. And Chase Edmonds, the running back, went to Tampa Bay. I already talked about Draymond Jones, so I'll talk about Dalton Risner a little bit. I liked him in the draft a lot. As I mentioned earlier at the start, or maybe I didn't say it on air, the Bears have a ton of injuries on their offensive line. There's one just sitting out there. Maybe he's waiting. Maybe he doesn't like doing training camp and practices and all that. So maybe we'll see him either sign soon, or some teams may wait till after week 1, because if you sign them after your week 1 game, like, they're not guaranteed their contract for the entire year or something. One of those crazy NFL contract rules, but that'll be a name to watch out for. I think he'll get picked up eventually.
Yeah, and I think looking at this list, I mean, I'm on board with you for Draymond Jones, but Calvin Anderson, offensive tackle, Dalton Risner, guard, Graham Glasgow, guard. You're losing a lot of those big meaty meters up front to block for your future Hall of Fame. Yeah, I don't know if we're putting that label on it yet, like Aaron said, but you're quarterback of the future and you're quarterback of the present too. Even if he is 35 or however old Russell Wilson is, you're losing a lot of those guys up front.
For me, I guess I'll go with where'd he go? Ronald Darby. I know he ripped his ACL last year, but he signed a 10-year, $30 million, 3-year, $30 million contract in 21. And like we said earlier, there's a lot of good receivers in this league, and I don't recall watching Darby get burnt that much. So,
yeah,
that was
I was surprised you didn't take the Calvin Anderson there, offensive tackle. Went to your team after losing out on Isaiah Wynn to keep him. That's could be a big name to watch.
I was going to let it slide. I don't want to talk about the Patriots too much.
No, well, I don't want to talk about the Bears too much either.
There you go.
Wink, wink. So we'll get back into their win totals. As I said, Kansas City's at 11.5. The Chargers are at 9.5. Las Vegas is at 6.5, and Denver's at 8.5. I can only imagine that is the Sean Payton bump for Denver at 8.5. I mean, they won 5 games last year, so they just got to assume that they're turning it around. But I mean, it's hard for me not to say Kansas City. Kyle, I know you said Chris Jones is out possibly the first 8 weeks. I don't see it happening. I think they'll get something done. They'll get it worked out. They're not going to just let that guy walk out the door who runs their entire defense. Their defense starts up front behind him. And if you do not have him, they know what's at stake. It's another Lombardi trophy in the case. So I definitely think they'll get the contract worked out, and they can always borrow from the bank of Mahomes to pay that man. So I think Kansas City, they just keep rolling, man. The Chargers, they had a good offseason. They have good names on defense. I don't know if I trust their coach. Las Vegas is, I mean, they're basically rebuilding at this point, and Denver is in flux. I mean, they're rebuilding, but it's kind of like a soft rebuild because they brought in experienced guys to create that rebuild. And in this division, if you start falling behind, good luck catching up. I mean, that's my opinion.
Yeah, and I think last year going into the season, everybody said, "Oh, this division's going to produce 4 playoff teams." They were looking at Denver adding Russell Wilson and Las Vegas adding Devontae Adams and the Chargers with Justin Herbert. And this year, I think that the AFC West is looking at 3 teams that could potentially make the playoffs. And the one team I'm obviously leaving out of that is Las Vegas, because what are they doing? What are you doing? I want to be different and say, either Denver or the Chargers or something like that, but I can't. I can't say that another team is going to win this division aside from Kansas City. It's just, I don't. It'll be close up to week 14, week 15, but I think Kansas City's going to lock this one up with a week or two at least left in the season.
I'm pretty sure there is no video evidence of me discussing this division last year at all. So we'll just bypass that. Start with Denver. Denver, with me, Russell Wilson's starting to play his way out of the Hall of Fame. So they have to fix all this with those 2 good receivers. Javonte Williams, when he gets back healthy, their offense could be awesome. So they got to fix that. That win total is pretty much spot on. The only reason I'm not picking the Chargers to win this division is because their head coach. That's it. I mean, I think their team is more talented than the Chiefs. But I have to pick the Chiefs just because.
Just because.
You don't it's the Chargers like you did last year?
No. Did I go Chargers or Broncos?
Oh, I did not. I hope you didn't say Broncos.
And Chiefs were finishing bottom. Very bottom. I think I had them at 6 wins or 7. It was bad. I must have been drinking heavily on that episode or something. I don't know.
Oh man. So just to wrap this thing up, we all have Kansas City in the AFC. Who did we have in the NFC? Did we all have San Fran, or
no?
Did you
Kyle had Seahawks.
Kyle had Seahawks. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, it's going to be a great year. Kyle, do you want to talk about what we're doing next week, and then we'll kind of get out of this thing?
Yeah. So next week, a different day, Tuesday instead of Wednesday, 6 days from today. It'll be the three of us plus Super Bowl winning quarterback Brad Johnson on the stream. We will be doing our live daily football roundup. Excuse me. I think it's the Brad Johnson daily football roundup. Fantasy football invitational. Your champion is defending his title. I probably can't be beat. I probably won't be stopped. Corey has a trophy sitting behind his left shoulder, I believe, from 2 years ago. But between the three of us, I'm looking to keep a championship here with the 12-ounce Curl Route podcast. You don't think one of us will win?
My bad. I thought you were going to say keep it at the house. No.
I'm looking to keep it within the 12-ounce family here.
It'll definitely do that. Yeah.
There's still spots open. I think we have a few spots open. 9 p.m. Eastern next Tuesday. Live streaming our draft on Sleeper. Hit us up if you want to get in. There's still a few spots.
Yeah, I'll let my tag team champions over here defend their titles. I'll just stand out with a tennis racket like
there you go,
Jim Cornette back in the day. I'm not much of a basically every year I sign up for fantasy. Sometimes I finish in like second place, but I literally have never hoisted a trophy as the fantasy champion. But who knows? Well, maybe that'll all change this year. I don't know.
The best damn fantasy champion in the world.
But if you guys like what you hear, tell your friends about the show. If you love the NFL, go to Daily Football Roundup. You can find them on TikTok, on Instagram. Find them right here on YouTube. You can like the video. You can subscribe. You can join the chat and talk to us throughout the show. Hopefully, going forward, we'll be able to focus on the chat a little more. If you got something, Corey?
Well, and the podcast too.
Yeah, absolutely. Going forward, we will be able to focus on the chat a little more because it'll be less analysis. We'll still have analysis, but we'll be able to go back and forth and talk about what we just saw, what we might see, and that'll definitely have more input from our fans. And we will be on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from. Thursday morning, so you'll be able to listen on your way to work and hear how goofy we are or how great we are at our picks for Thursday night football before that all kicks off. But I'm definitely looking forward to really getting the ball rolling in a couple of weeks and starting the 12-ounce Curl Route 6-pack challenge. And I already know one of the games that we're going to talk about for week 1. But we'll have to get. Why do you look so down, Kyle?
I was
already going on
head. I don't know if I can drink 6 beers in an hour, but the 6-pack challenge is where we actually pick our winners for the week. Not over here chugging beers, so we're good.
We'll pick 6 games. And whoever loses at the end of the year when we count up our totals, they'll be paying for the others to chug beers. But we'll work all that out. But I think it's time to get out of here. Like I said, like, comment, subscribe, tell your friends and family to come by and see the best damn podcast in the world, the 12-ounce Curl Route podcast. See y'all.